Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha. We're finishing up Volume 5, which is titled The First Stage of Enlightenment, Stream Enterer. We're going to be studying chapters 41 through 53 today, and this will complete out the complete part of this book that we've gone through over the course of about 5 weeks, studying a collection of teachings that are needed in order to get to that first stage of enlightenment. What's important to keep in mind, though, is that it's not just the teachings in this book that are going to help you get to enlightenment. There's volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4 that lead you up to volume 5. So it's important to build a foundation with volume 1 first, and perhaps using the group learning program or the other courses and retreats that I teach in order to help you build a foundation. And then moving into volumes 2, 3, 4, it really prepares you for volume 5 to then be able to focus on what is needed in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And then this August, which is only about another 4 weeks from now, I'm going to be teaching a retreat starting on August 20th through the 25th, which is going to take all the teachings that you need to get to the first stage of enlightenment and lay them out in a retreat format where you're able to learn them in a certain order in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment with the teachings that are needed. You won't be at the first stage of enlightenment by the end of the retreat, but by the end of the retreat, you'll have everything you need to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment and then still be able to reach out and get help. And that's going to be taught here in Chiang Mai at the temple. It's not going to be live streamed, but if you're in Chiang Mai or you're close by and you would like to come, you're more than welcome. It's available at no cost to anybody and everybody who would like to come and join for that particular retreat. So today we're going to focus on chapters 41 through 53 of volume 5. And the way that we do this program is we typically start with a meditation, but because we're doing 13 chapters today, which is a bit more than normal, we're going to just go right into actually studying the chapters. And what I do is I seek volunteers from Zoom. If there's anybody who would like to volunteer to read the chapter, then I will share teachings on that chapter and then open up to any and all questions that you have. If you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put your questions into the comment section and I'll be able to see those and answer them for you. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So if there's someone who would like to read from Zoom, if you would like to just raise your hand electronically, you can go ahead and I'll call on you. Okay, it looks like Donnie's going to volunteer to read the first chapter, which is chapter 41. I'll just switch over to be able to display it. And there you go, Donnie. Thank you for volunteering.
Sure. Chapter 41. Death at the Door of Deathless Enlightenment. It is possible, Sunakata, that some monk here might think thus. Craving has been caught an arrow by the aesthetic. The poisonous, unwholesome, mental quality of ignorance, unknowing or true reality is spread about by desire, craving, and anger. That arrow of craving has been removed from me. The poisonous, unwholesome mental quality of ignorance or unknowing of true reality has been expelled. I am one which is completely intent on Nibbana or enlightenment. Because he falsely thinks of himself thus, he might pursue those things that are unsuitable for one completely intent on Nibbana or enlightenment. He might pursue the sight of unsuitable forms with the eye. He might pursue unsuitable sounds with the ear, unsuitable odors with the nose, unsuitable flavors with the tongue, unsuitable physical objects with the body, or unsuitable mental objects with the mind. When he pursues the sight of unsuitable forms with the eye, he might pursue unsuitable sounds with the ear, unsuitable odors with the nose, unsuitable flavors with the tongue, unsuitable physical objects with the body, or unsuitable mental objects with the mind. Craving invades his mind. With his mind invaded by craving, he will incur death or deadly pain. Suppose, Sunakata, a man was wounded by an arrow thickly smeared with poisons, and his friends and companions, his kinsmen and relatives brought a surgeon. The surgeon will cut around the opening of the wound with a knife, and he will probe for the arrow with a probe, and then he would pull out the arrow and would expel the poisonous substance, leaving a trace of it behind. Knowing that a trace was left behind, he would say, "Good man, the arrow has been pulled out from you, the poisonous substance has been expelled with a trace left behind, but It is incapable of harming you. Eat only suitable food. Do not eat unsuitable food, or else the wound may accumulate pus and blood. From time to time, wash the wound, and from time to time, anoint its opening, so that pus and blood do not cover the opening of the wound. Do not walk around in the wind and sun, or else dust and dirt might infect the opening of the wound. Take care of your wound, good man, and see to it that the wound heals. The man would think, the arrow has been pulled out from me, poisonous substance has been expelled, with no trace left behind, and it is incapable of harming me. He would eat unsuitable food, and the wound would accumulate pus and blood. He would not wash the wound from time to time, nor would he anoint its opening from time to time, and pus and blood would cover the opening of the wound. He would walk around in the wind and sun, and dust and dirt would infect the opening of the wound. He would not take care of his wound, nor would he see to it that the wound heals. Then, both because he does what is unsuitable and because the foul poisonous substance has been expelled with a trace left behind, the wound would swell, and with its swelling he would incur death or deadly pain. So too, Sunahata, it is possible that someone here might think thus. Craving has been called an error by the aesthetic. The poisonous, unwholesome mental quality of ignorance, unknowing or true reality, is spread about by desire, craving, and anger. The error of anger, of craving, has been removed from me. The poisonous, unwholesome mental quality of ignorance, or unknowing or true reality, has been expelled. I am completely intent upon Nibbana, enlightenment. Because he falsely thinks of himself thus, he might pursue those things that are unsuitable for one completely intent on Nibbana, enlightenment. He might pursue the sight of unsuitable form with the eye. He might pursue unsuitable sounds with the ear, unsuitable odors with the nose, unsuitable flavors with the tongue, unsuitable physical objects with the body, or unsuitable mental objects with the mind. When he pursues the sight of unsuitable forms with the eye, he might pursue unsuitable sounds with the ear, unsuitable odors with the nose, unsuitable flavors with the tongue, unsuitable physical objects with the body, or unsuitable mental objects with the mind. Craving invades his mind. With his mind invaded by craving, he would incur death or deadly pain. For it is death in the discipline of the noble one, Sunahata, when one abandons the training and reverts to the low life, and it is deadly pain when one carries out some defiled conduct.
All right. Thank you, Donnie. So there's a lot going on here in this teaching from the Buddha. So let me help you to understand it. First, the death at the door of the deathless. Once you attain enlightenment, this is called the deathless element, or having attained the deathless element. Because from that point, the mind is enlightened. You've escaped the cycle of rebirth. You're no longer going to experience death. At the time of the physical body dying, in the mind separating, we call this final enlightenment once the mind is actually enlightened, because now the mind and the body fully separate and there's absolutely no more attachment whatsoever. Because while you're actually enlightened, you'll still experience physical pain. It'll be muted and it won't have the mental anguish that you experienced in the unenlightened state, but there will be some minor physical pain, and that's there in order to alert you to what's going on in the body so that you can take action. Where in the past, if you stumped your toe, you might have gotten angry at people, you might have started blaming people, you might have started cussing and having all kinds of difficulties. Now, as you get closer to enlightenment and the mind is enlightened and you stump your toe, you're going to know that pain is impermanent, and you know that it's based on your decisions that caused this pain in the foot that you stumped your toe, and now you'll just deal with the pain, get over it, and then move past it. You won't have the mental anguish. So the mental anguish heightens the pain in the body, that when you experience the physical pain, then when the mental anguish goes along with it, what you experience is a lot heightened amount of pain. But when you don't have the mental anguish and it's just the physical pain, it's actually very muted. So we call this the deathless element when you attain enlightenment. Most often we refer to it as enlightenment, or having attained enlightenment, or one is an arahant or an enlightened being. but you'll see sometimes where the Buddha refers to it as the deathless element. So if somebody's about to attain enlightenment, if they're, say, in the first stage of enlightenment, the Buddha talks about this as standing at the door of the deathless. You haven't walked through yet. Haven't walked into the door of the deathless, but you're standing at the door of the deathless. So this whole book is geared towards helping you get to the point where you're standing in front of that door and you have the opportunity to walk through it. Here, the Buddha is talking about central desire, and he's also discussing craving and ignorance as well. So he's talking about these unwholesome mental qualities of craving, anger, and ignorance, or these three poisons, or three unwholesome roots, or three fires. This is what motivates all unskillful conduct, and ultimately, because one is making decisions in the unenlightened state through craving, anger, and ignorance, making those unwise decisions, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So what you're doing on this path to enlightenment is to purify the mind of craving, anger, and ignorance, and getting to the point where you've uprooted these three unwholesome roots, and now you're practicing the three wholesome roots of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So the Buddha is describing here how when one has craving, anger, and ignorance, which in more detail is described as the 10 fetters, and one of those fetters is central desire. The 10 fetters are the 10 individual pollutions that are hindering the mind from being able to experience the brightness and the radiance and the joy of the enlightened mind. All those mental qualities that I talk about associated with enlightenment, like concentration, focus, clarity of mind, deep memory, having your personal, professional relationships blossom, not even being in a bad mood, that an enlightened being is always in a good mood. All of those qualities and others come about when you eliminate the 10 fetters. And one of the most significant fetters is called central desire. This is where the mind is longing and yearning through the sense bases, wanting pleasurable contact, wanting agreeable contact. And if the mind gets what it wants, then it gets those pleasant feelings. They're conditioned on that contact. But those pleasant feelings of happiness, excitement, elation, and others are only temporary, because it's only a matter of time before the conditions change, and now the mind moves to the painful feelings of sadness, anger, frustration, and others. So what you're doing is you're training the mind to no longer indulge in these central desires, that you're not chasing after the objects of your affection. And it's craving, anger, and ignorance, those poisons that are hindering you from being able to understand this if you haven't yet understood it. The ignorance or unknowing of true reality is the main source problem that the Buddha discovered. We talked about that in dependent origination, but then that leads to craving, which is the mental longing and strong eagerness, and then that leads to the discontentedness, which anger is part of that. So here the Buddha is talking about how when one lacks certain wisdom, they're going to have this longing and yearning through the sense bases of the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. And one might indulge in unsuitable forms or sounds or odors or flavors or bodily contact with physical objects or mental objects. So let me give you an example here. At one point in our life, we might have indulged in alcohol or drugs or something like that, or we might have indulged in listening to gossip or slandering and doing things like this, or maybe we ate a lot of unhealthy food at different times. There's various decisions that we make that cause harm to others and cause harm to us. And when we gain wisdom, we're moving to this higher consciousness, we start seeing this cause and effect, that our decisions are leading to certain results in life, and that we can clean that up by making wise decisions. So what you're doing on this path to enlightenment, among other things, is becoming aware of things that are unwise and that are unwholesome, and that you decide, because you see the truth, you see the true reality, that continuing to do unwholesome things and making unwise decisions keep harming yourself. It's kind of like you're kicking up sand and the wind blows the sand back in your eyes. But we don't see that when we're in the unenlightened state, because it's not as immediate as kicking up sand and the wind blows the sand right back in your face. Because if you've done that once or twice, you immediately stop doing that and you probably never do it again. But the unfortunate thing is that we don't always see that, because we might make a decision and it's not until 6 months later or 2 years later that the results come back to us. So we don't always correlate the decision that we've made to the results that we're experiencing. But more and more, you can see that if you study the natural law of Gama, of cause and effect and action and result, and you see what your mind is doing, namely here, the central desire where you're longing and yearning, chasing after the objects of your affection, craving for things to be permanently pleasing. That's what the mind's doing when it has central desire. So the Buddha is describing this through this analogy of an individual who gets wounded with an arrow of poison. And now the doctor has removed pretty much most of the poison, but there's still a residual amount of poison. So the doctor's giving this person some advice of what to do in order to ensure that they're not harmed by this residual amount or this trace amount of poison. But this particular individual is thinking that all the poison has been removed, even though there's still a trace amount there. This person's mind is thinking everything's been removed. So they're still living in that ignorance or that unknowing of true reality or that delusion or misperception. And now, because they think everything's been removed out of the body, they are making unwise decisions. And now their injury starts to have problems, and ultimately it doesn't heal, and they actually die. And the Buddha is describing this as it relates to his teachings, that if you kind of get to the point where you think craving, anger, and ignorance has been removed, and you convince yourself of that, that ultimately your mind can become complacent, and then you won't do the rest of the work that you need to truly eliminate all the poison from the mind and get to the point where the mind's actually enlightened. Because as you're eliminating the craving, anger, and ignorance and all these fetters, there's a certain amount of concentration and focus, clarity of mind, deep memory that's coming in. You're starting to experience certain amount of improvement in your personal and professional relationships. You're noticing that you're pretty much in a good mood all the time. And if you allow the mind to become complacent and thinking that, okay, this stuff is all gone, all these poisons have been eliminated because you've been at this for a while, then you can get to the point where the mind's complacent and you don't see the small trace amounts of poison that are in your mind. Another way to think about this, in addition to the analogy that the Buddha is describing here, is that if you were cleaning the dust out of your house, you might clear the vast majority of the dust out of your house, but there's still a little bit in the corners that you haven't seen and that you haven't addressed. So you need to be super thorough. Bring out the rag and getting every last little drop of craving, anger, and ignorance and those 10 fetters out of the mind, never truly convincing yourself that you've actually attained anything at all. Whether you think you're in the first, second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment, don't ever convince yourself that you're even in those stages of enlightenment. Just continue to stay diligent to know what those 10 fetters are, know what the symptoms are when they're arising, and then know the antidotes to apply to them so that you'll be able to then apply. So if you have mindfulness or awareness of mind, this is the guard that's going to guard your mind. And now wherever you see one of those 10 fetters popping up and starting to create certain aspects in the mind, you can then stamp it out with whatever the remedy is. Because the Buddha describes all the way here towards the end that if one pursues unsuitable central desires, then essentially what they're going to do is experience this death, essentially. That it's death for one who abandons the training and reverts to the low life. In other words, you allow your mind to regress or you become complacent. It's deadly pain when one does this defiled moral conduct where you're functioning in a way that is opposite of what he taught, because the teachings that he's sharing is based on the natural law of Gama. They're not rules or commandments. He's showing you the unwise and unwholesome decisions that we make that lead to unwholesome results. So even if you get to a point where there's just a little tiny bit of poison in the mind, and you're pretty much experiencing peace for 3 months at a time, 6 months at a time. But if you allow even a trace amount to sneak back into the mind or to not get eliminated from the mind, you might do some defiled moral conduct. And then when that comes back to you, you're going to experience the unwholesome results of that. So don't ever convince yourself that you're actually enlightened or that you're in any of the stages of enlightenment. Just stay diligent and determined to guard the mind and look out for these fetters and poisons so that any time you see something arising, you can eliminate it. And where you need help, you reach out to your teacher and I'll help you. Any questions on this particular chapter, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to help you. Or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Looks like Marcy, you have your hand up. What's your question?
Teacher David, as the Buddha speaks about sensual desire here, so one of the things that I enjoy doing is cooking vegan meals and stuff. And now obviously I have to taste the food for it to find out whether it's got a, if it tastes good. Is that, like, how would I know whether or not that's like a craving, or am I just tasting it just to make sure that it's palatable? Because I know that the Buddha teaches to be not to be agreeable or disagreeable, but it just is what it is.
Sure.
You know what I'm...
Yep. What you're doing is you're observing the mind, right? Because we're going to, even in the enlightened mental state, you're going to take in things through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. But what you're looking for is you're looking to ensure you're not getting conditioned feelings. So say you taste something and you're like, oh, yes, that's the best I've ever had. Oh, my goodness, that's so wonderful. Oh, I'm so happy that that tastes so great, right? So that's the arrogance arising, like, wow, look at me, I'm such a great cook. And, oh, I'm so happy because this food tastes good, right? So that's a conditioned feeling. Whereas if you taste it, you're like, that tastes pretty good. Yeah, that's going to taste quite nice. Let's get some food on the table. Let's go, right? You just kind of move on with what you're doing. So you can notice that, wow, that tastes quite nice. That's the way that I'd like it to taste. And now let's go forward, rather than like dwelling in that and allowing the mind to get a conditioned feeling. So the action is the same. You're tasting the food. It's all about what the mind is doing. So that's why you've got mindfulness in there to watch over the mind and pay attention to what is going on in the mind. Is there this longing, yearning? Like, for example, say you taste the food and you're like, oh my God, that's so horrible. Oh, I can't stand that. That's so miserable. That's the mind going into the painful feelings and then starting to vocalize that. So what you would like to do is just observe the mind. Is there any conditioned pleasant feelings that are arising? Are there any conditioned painful feelings that are arising? Or am I just tasting it just to be sure it has the flavor that I'm looking for? And now once it has that flavor, now we move on and just go ahead and move forward with eating because that's what we'd like to do.
Thank you, Teacher David. That makes a lot of sense.
Yep. So it's not the object itself, so you can have wonderful tasting food as an enlightened being, but an enlightened being is going to understand that not every single food you're going to eat is going to taste so wonderful. There's going to be certain times where you sit down for a meal, maybe at a friend's house or at a restaurant or something, and it's not going to taste the way you're interested in. And then you can either take action to resolve it and get help with the waiter or the staff, or you can do whatever you like, but you're not going to be discontent in that situation where the food is not what you would normally eat. So in the unenlightened state, when we taste something that is disagreeable to us, then we'll experience those painful feelings. And the reason why is because when we're tasting something that's agreeable, we're allowing the mind to get those pleasant feelings. So don't allow your mind to get those conditioned pleasant feelings. But the middle way is just, yeah, this tastes quite good. This is nice food. Wow, it's so great. Thank you. Right? So I've gone to like students' house before and they've cooked for me. It's like, oh, wow, this is really great food. Outstanding. Wonderful. But you're not getting conditioned pleasant feelings because of it. So therefore you won't get the conditioned painful feelings either. Let's see if we have any questions anywhere else. All right, it looks like that's all the questions we have coming in on this chapter. So we can move to the next one, which is chapter 42. Is there anyone who would like to read this? I saw Marcy's physical hand go up. Go ahead, Marcy.
10 abodes of the noble ones. The mind is liberated by wisdom. Monks, there are these 10 abodes of the noble ones in which the noble one resides in the past, present, or future. What 10? Here, a monk has abandoned 5 factors, possesses 6 factors, has a single guard and 4 supports, has eliminated personal belief, totally renounced seeking, purified his intentions, calmed the bodily activity, and become well liberated in the mind and well liberated by wisdom. And how has a monk abandoned 5 factors? Here, a monk has abandoned sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness, and worry and doubt. In this way, that a monk has abandoned 5 factors. And how does a monk possess 6 factors? Here, having seen a form with the eye, a monk is neither happy nor saddened, but reside equanimous, mindful, and clearly comprehending. Having heard a sound with the ear, having smelled an odor with the nose, having tasted the flavor with the tongue, having touched physical object with the body, having recognized mental object with the mind, a monk is neither happy nor sad, but resides equanimous, mindful, and clearly comprehending. It is in this way that a monk possesses 6 factors. And how does a monk have a single guard? Here, a monk possesses a mind guarded by mindfulness. In this way, that monk has a single guard. And how does a monk have 4 supports? Here, having reflected, a monk uses some things, patiently endures other things, avoids still other things, and dispels still other things. In this way, that a monk has 4 supports. And how has a monk eliminated personal belief? Here, whatever ordinary personal beliefs may be held by ordinary Aztecs and Brahmins, that is, the world is eternal, or the world is not eternal, the world is finite, the world is infinite, the soul and the body are the same, or the soul is one thing and the body is another. The Tathagata exists after death, or the Tathagata does not exist after death, or the Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death, or the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death. A monk has discarded and dispelled them all, give them up, rejected them, let go of them, abandoned and relinquished them. It is in this way that a monk has eliminated personal beliefs. And how has a monk totally renounced seeking? Here, a monk has abandoned the search for sensual pleasures and the search for existence and has eliminated the search for spiritual life. It is in this way that a monk has totally renounced seeking. And how has a monk purified his intention? Here, a monk has abandoned sensual intentions, intentions of ill will, intentions of harming. In this way, that a monk has purified his intentions. And how has a monk calmed bodily activity? Here, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous fading away of former gladness and sadness, a monk enters and resides in the 4th jhana, which is beyond pleasure and pain, and purified by equanimity and mindfulness. It is in this way that a monk has calm bodily activity. And how has a monk well liberated in mind? Here, a monk's mind is liberated by craving, anger, ignorance of unknowing true reality. It is in this way that a monk is well liberated in mind. And how is a monk well liberated by wisdom? Here, a monk understands, I have abandoned craving, cut it off at the root, made it like a palm stump, obliterated it so that it is no more subject to future arising. I have abandoned anger, cut it off at the root, made it like a palm stump, obliterated it so that it is no more subject to the future arising. Abandoned ignorance, a knowing of true reality, cut it off at the root, made it like a palm stump, obliterated it so that it is no more subject to future arising. It is in this way that a monk is well liberated by wisdom. Monks, whenever noble ones in the past reside in noble abodes, all resided in these same 10 abodes. Whenever noble ones in the future will reside in noble abodes, all will reside in the same 10 noble abodes. Whenever noble ones in the present reside in noble abodes, all reside in these same 10 noble abodes. These are the 10 abodes of noble ones in which noble ones reside in the past, present, or future.
All right. Thank you, Marcy. So these 10 noble abodes are very important for you to understand because this is what's going to lead to your enlightenment. So I'm going to go through each one of these in detail and explain them. But if you guys would like more detail, just let me know at any point. So the first one here, by the way, what a noble abode is an abode is like a dwelling, a place to reside. So a noble one is someone who's deeply practicing the teachings and has, been very dedicated and determined to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. So this first one, he's saying that a monk has abandoned 5 factors. What he's talking about here are the 5 hindrances. These are the 5 hindrances that are going to hinder you from actually getting to enlightenment. And 4 out of the 5 are actually the fetters as well. So the Buddha sometimes recasts things and describes it in different ways and puts it as part of different teachings. So like mindfulness is part of the Eightfold Path. It's part of the 7 factors of enlightenment, and you'll see it show up in other parts of his teachings as well. So sensual desire, ill will, restlessness, and doubt are all part of the 10 fetters. But just like these are fetters that keep one trapped in the unenlightened state, these are also the most significant things that are going to actually hinder you from being able to experience enlightenment. So you're going to need to understand what these 5 hindrances are. And I'm going to be teaching a class on this in the group learning program coming up in a few weeks. So the very last class of every group learning program is me teaching the 5 hindrances. So for 7 months, I teach people in the group learning program of what it takes to get to enlightenment. And then the very last class, I teach people what's going to actually hinder them from being able to get to enlightenment. So sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness and worry and doubt are all things that you need to understand what they are, so that when they're arising, you can see those symptoms, and then you can apply the antidote or the remedy, which is what I teach you in that class. Then number 2, this is where he's talking about an individual possesses 6 factors. Here he's talking about that when you see a certain form, you're neither happy nor saddened, but you reside equanimous, mindful, and clearly comprehending. And he goes through all the 6 sense bases describing this. This is essentially what Marcy was just asking a question about in the previous chapter. It's like, what should I do if I'm tasting my food and I'm trying to get it to a certain taste? What should I do? Well, you don't allow the mind to experience happiness. You don't allow it to experience sadness. You just remain equanimous, which is calm, composed, evenness of temper, with mindfulness, which is awareness of your mind and clearly comprehending, where you have concentration. Whenever you see the Buddha talk about clearly comprehending, that means concentration and focus. So you maintain your mind with this calmness and composure, this awareness of mind and concentration, and you don't allow it to become either happy or sad based on seeing things with your eyes, hearing things with your ears, smelling things with the nose, tasting things with the tongue, coming in contact with something with the physical body, or certain mental objects. So one of the things that the mind can do is you can be thinking about the past, and you can be thinking about pleasurable things or painful things. And then because your mind's clinging to those experiences in the past, you can create feelings that are conditioned in the present moment based on things that happened in the past. So that's why we use the mind as saying it's a 6 sense base. And the same thing happens for the future. Like say you're getting ready to go on holiday or vacation. You might get all these pleasant feelings and be so excited about what's going to happen in the future. So there hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body. But in the mind is having these thoughts where it's longing, yearning, it's craving, or it's clinging to pleasurable things in the past or future, or painful things in the past, or maybe you're anticipating painful things in the future, and now in the present moment, you're experiencing discontentedness because of the mind itself. That's why it's a 6 sense base. So the Buddha is saying, don't allow the mind to be either happy or sad. Remember, that's conditioned happiness, right? So you're not interested in the conditioned happiness. You're interested in remaining calm, composed, with awareness of mind and concentration. That's the 6 things that you possess, is being able to understand these 6 sense bases and not allowing the mind to go up or down based on experiences of contact through the 6 sense bases. And the way that you do that is here in number 3, where he talks about having a single guard. This is where you guard the mind with mindfulness. Whenever you see the Buddha talking about guarding the mind, it's that mindfulness or awareness of mind that's going to allow you to do that. So I talk about mindfulness generally as awareness of mind, but more specifically, it's those 4 foundations of mindfulness that you need to understand and learn if you haven't already learned them, and then you need to reflect on them and practice them. These are the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. You need to have awareness of these, because in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to be aware of discontentedness that is arising as just a bodily sensation. It's being caused by craving, desire, attachment. But before the mind experiences a feeling, it's going to first have a certain bodily sensation. And you'd like to cut it off and let it go there. And this is where you're really gaining control and discipline of the mind. But if it becomes a feeling, you can cut it off there. And if you don't, it's going to affect the condition of the mind for a few hours or a few days or a week or so. And you can cut it off there too, because then it's going to kind of more deeply root this mental object. It's going to add more to this mental object of, say, ill will or central desire or something like this. So the sooner that you can catch the discontentedness as a bodily sensation would be ideal. Then you can get more discipline and control of the mind. It's kind of like a wild bush that's growing, and you're trying to cut it back and cut it back and cut it back so that you can uproot it and get the roots out so that it never grows back. So it's mindfulness that is that guard, that awareness of mind, and more specifically, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So you'll need to learn those. I've taught classes on those. I have books that talk about those, and then I can also help you through personal guidance too, or answering questions here to help you understand that more deeply so that you can then practice it. Then number 4 is having these 4 supports. What this is that you use some things, patiently endure others, avoid still other things, and dispel some other things. What this is that certain things that come into your life, you would like to see the truth, that there's certain things that you're going to use and that you're going to need. Like maybe you would like to, using Marcy's example, some herbs in your food, and you would like to use these herbs, right? And then you might need to patiently endure some other things. You might eat some food someday and it's like, oh, this food doesn't taste the way that I prefer for it to taste, but I'm just going to patiently endure it. I'm just going to eat it. It's going to sustain this body. It's going to provide nourishment. It doesn't taste the way it typically would taste, but I'm just going to eat it. I'm going to patiently endure this thing. Then there's certain things that you might avoid, like maybe you avoid MSG or you avoid caffeine or something like this, using the same analogy of eating. And then there's still some things that you dispel, right? Like in terms of like maybe cocaine or heroin or crystal meth, you completely dispel that and decide to set that aside. But this not only relates to certain objects like that you're eating in here, this example, but it also comes down to certain things that you might be thinking about or certain things that you might be using in life. So it could be a thought, it could be an object. There are certain things that you're going to use, certain things you're going to patiently endure, certain things you're going to avoid, certain things that you're going to completely, move away from and not even get anywhere near them, right? So that's what the Buddha is describing, and you would need to be able to see this on a case-by-case basis for yourself. And the more wisdom that you have about the path to enlightenment, you'll be able to accomplish that. Then number 5, by the time you get to enlightenment, you've eliminated all your personal beliefs. The Buddha is talking about 10 individual beliefs here, but all personal beliefs you've eliminated. And you're not just doing that just haphazardly, you're doing it based in wisdom, so that when the mind is experiencing anger and frustration, irritation, annoyance, any of those discontent feelings, there's a certain amount of false truths that are in the mind, that the mind hasn't yet fully cultivated wisdom. You haven't got to what the Buddha calls final knowledge. By the time you get to enlightenment, you've attained final knowledge. You've completely uprooted ignorance or unknowing of true reality from the mind. And you do that from learning, you do that from reflecting to independently verify, and you do that through practicing the teachings. That's what transforms the mind. So right now, you might have certain beliefs, certain opinions or views about the world. These things are all there, and they're motivating certain decisions that you make. And then they're motivating, because of the decisions you make, certain results, either wholesome or unwholesome. As you go forward in this path, you're going to see certain things that conflict with what you currently believe, so to speak. And that's because your mind is still holding on to those false beliefs, those misperceptions, those misunderstandings. And what you need to do is learn, reflect, independently verify, and practice so that you can uproot these beliefs, but instead you're functioning on truths, that you understand the truth about how the world functions and why things are happening the way that they do. And some of the things that the Buddha is describing that one would eliminate as personal beliefs are also referred to the Buddha's undeclared teachings. For 45 years, he taught various teachings that are assembled in 45 large volumes that are about 4 to 6 inches thick, or maybe 10 centimeters, I guess. And these books, 45 volumes, have a litany of different teachings that he taught. Well, there's a certain portion of his teachings where he says, remember what I taught. I taught this. And he points to the Four Noble Truths. And then he says, remember what I didn't teach. I did not teach this. These are my undeclared teachings. And he says the world is eternal or the world is not eternal. He didn't declare whether that's true or false, or whether the world is eternal or not eternal. He didn't declare whether the world is finite or infinite. He didn't declare whether their soul and the body are the same or the soul is one thing and the body is another. He left the teachings about a soul completely out of his teachings because it conflicts with his teachings on the universal truth of impermanence and the universal truth of non-self. So he didn't declare whether there is or isn't a soul. He just left it as an undeclared teaching. And then the Tathagata exists after death, or the Tathagata does not exist after death. So a Tathagata is a Buddha. The word Tathagata he used to use to refer to himself, which means one who's discovered the truth or one who shares the truth. He left it as an undeclared teaching of once he died, whether he will exist or he won't exist. And you'll need to get to the point where you understand that as an enlightened being getting to enlightenment, that you don't know what's next, and that's okay with you. Your mind should be so peaceful and joyful in the present moment as an enlightened being that you don't care what's next, if anything at all. So the Buddha didn't declare whether he exists or he doesn't exist, but you can also relate this to an enlightened being as well, because the Buddha was an enlightened being. So if you get to enlightenment, he's not declaring whether you exist or you don't exist after death, or whether you both exist or do not exist after death, or whether you neither exist nor do not exist. He left all this as an undeclared teaching. And the interesting thing is that you will see people that will share what they're calling Buddhist teachings that will actually take a definitive stance on these things. They will say either the world is eternal or the world is not eternal, or the world is finite or infinite, or they will talk about a soul related to the teachings of the Buddha, or they will say once you attain enlightenment, you don't exist anymore whatsoever. But the Buddha never said those things, and you can see that here, and you can see it in other places as well. So these are what's called his undeclared teachings, and you need to get to the point where you don't believe in whether these things are true or false, that you just understand that they're undeclared, and that you ultimately get to a point where you've let go and abandoned any kind of personal beliefs but you do that through wisdom. You don't do it through blind belief and just believing something else. You don't just replace your current beliefs with new beliefs. Instead, you get rid of all belief, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. What you would like to get to is wisdom. And that's how you do it, is through learning, reflecting, and practicing. And then slowly but surely, you start seeing that what you once believed about the world, that the Buddhist teachings are completely abolishing that. And one of the first things you learn along those lines is when we first start on this path, we believe that other people are causing us to be angry. We believe that other people are annoying us, or the situation is annoying us. We believe that, right? But then when you learn the Four Noble Truths, you learn it, you reflect on it to independently verify it, and then you practice it and you see the truth. And you don't believe that anymore because you have wisdom and you know the truth. So you do that with each individual aspect of the teachings of the Buddha, and you get rid of and wipe clean all these beliefs, because those beliefs are just conditioned experiences that the mind's holding on to. And now you're having certain struggles and difficulties in life because you're making decisions through your beliefs rather than based on wisdom or truth. So you can get rid of that as you're gradually learning, reflecting, and practicing to discover the truth and acquire wisdom. Then number 6, a monk has renounced seeking. What the Buddha is talking about here is searching for sensual pleasures, that you have eliminated sensual desire, that fetter of sensual desire, that you're no longer searching and looking around the world for things to please the mind through the sense bases, that you've eliminated searching for existence. What this means is that you're no longer holding on to the world and wanting to exist in the world, but you're also not seeking non-existence either. That you understand, like, okay, this body, this mind is in existence. I'm going to make the most of this existence, but I'm not craving to hold on to this existence, but I'm not craving non-existence either. So you're not searching for existence. And then the third one that he talks about here is eliminating search for a spiritual life. That by the time you've learned and penetrated his teachings deeply enough, you will no longer be searching for a spiritual life because you have one. You already have a spiritual life. So you don't need to be searching for a spiritual life, because once you penetrate the teachings of the Buddha deeply enough and you see the truth and you see the condition of your mind gradually improving, you get to the point where you eliminate all doubts, that you have no doubt that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind, an improved life, and that you're on the road and on the path to enlightenment. It's just a matter of you continuing to learn and continuing to practice that you're going to get there. So you will have eliminated search for a spiritual life because you've already found one. So an individual has renounced all three types of this seeking: seeking central pleasures, seeking existence, and seeking a spiritual life. Then the Buddha talks about purifying one's intentions. This goes back to right intention in the Eightfold Path, that this is one of the building blocks to help you build out the whole rest of the Eightfold Path, that you're going to need to fully cultivate in the mind the intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, and the intention of harmlessness. Here, the Buddha is describing it a little bit different way. He's talking about abandoning central intention, abandoning the intention of ill will, and abandoning harming. But in the Eightfold Path, he's describing it in terms of what you need to cultivate, which is cultivate the intention of renunciation, where you're willing to let go. You're not clinging and craving and holding on. One thing that the mind usually holds on to is this central desire and longing and yearning through the sense bases. But there's other things that the mind is holding on to as well. So that's why you need to be willing to let go. If you were holding on and holding on and holding on and not willing to let go of the things that your mind currently has, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment, because you're going to need to clear out the conditioned mind to be able to get to this unconditioned mind. So you're going to need to have the intention of renunciation and abandon the longing and yearning through the sense bases, or the central intention. You're going to need to abandon the intention of ill will and cultivate the intention of non-ill will, or goodwill, or loving kindness, where you're interested in seeing all beings be well. And getting to the point where you cultivate the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested and incapable of harming other beings. Because as long as you cause harm to other beings, that harm is going to come back to you. So you're going to need to cultivate the intention of harmlessness and abandon any interest in harming other beings. And that's going to help you and support you in all the rest of the development of the Eightfold Path, and ultimately getting to enlightenment. So an individual who's residing in these 10 abodes is going to have purified their intentions in this way. Then the Buddha is talking about calming the bodily activity. Here he's referencing the fourth jhana, which those jhanas are the four preliminary phases that the mind goes through before it gets to the first stage of enlightenment. And here he's talking about how one who is calming the bodily activity and in this fourth stage of enlightenment, that they've abandoning pleasure and pain, that they're beyond this pleasure and pain, meaning conditioned pleasure and pain. In the enlightened mental state, you're going to experience complete fulfillment, complete satisfaction. You're not going to want for anything, because you're going to have all your needs met and your mind's going to be fully fulfilled, fully satisfied. You're going to have peace and joy beyond anything you ever imagined. But this conditional pleasure and this conditional pain is something that one is experiencing as they're on the path to enlightenment. And you need to get to the point where you're no longer interested in conditional pleasure, because you see it's temporary, that it only lasts for a temporary period of time. And then if you allow the mind to have conditioned pleasure, it's only a matter of time before you're experiencing the painful side of that too. Because if you have conditional happiness, excitement, elation, or others, when those conditions change, now your mind's going to end up in the painful feelings of sadness, anger, and others. So here the Buddha is talking about one who has purified the mind to a certain extent, where it's in the fourth jhana, and now you're beyond this pleasure and pain, and your mind's not going up and down anymore, but it's come more to the middle. In the fourth jhana, you're still experiencing discontentedness. You're going to be experiencing some amount of discontentedness all the way up until the mind's actually enlightened. Even in that third stage of enlightenment, there's occasional discontentedness, be it once every 3 months or once every 6 months, and it's very minor, very muted, doesn't last very long, and you can stamp it out pretty quickly. But nonetheless, you're going to be experiencing some discontentedness. Here in the fourth stage, or I'm sorry, here in the fourth jhana, you're going to be experiencing some discontentedness, but you're beyond the seeking of this pleasure and pain. Your mind is purified with equanimity, meaning calmness and composure, and mindfulness, where the mind is having this awareness of mind. You have full awareness of the mind. There's no longer a subconscious mind and a conscious mind by the time you get to the fourth jhana. It actually occurs in the second jhana, where the mind becomes unified and you have oneness of mind. And now the mind is having this calmness, composure, and you have this full awareness or mindfulness. And here, the mind becomes very tranquil. In these jhanas, you start experiencing this tranquility of the mind. When the mind is tranquil, the body is tranquil. Or using some of the words that the Buddha is using here, is that when the mind is calm, the body will be calm too. If you notice you're like tapping your fingers repetitively, or you're bobbing your knee or something like this is the body, but it's the mind. It's all coming from the mind. The mind is the boss, the body is the employee. So what you would like to do is calm the mind so that then you can calm the body. If you've ever experienced like pain in your neck or your shoulders when the mind is stressed or having anxiety, that's all coming from the mind, because the mind's the boss, the body's the employee. So you would like to get to the point where you've trained your mind so well, it's got this equanimity and mindfulness that the mind is tranquil, the mind is calm, and therefore the body is also tranquil and calm. If you have ever come home feeling like you're carrying a ton of bricks and you just want to collapse on the couch, this is because the mind has been overactive throughout your day, carrying around the burden of craving, anger, and ignorance. And you can get to the point where you eliminate that from the mind, and now you won't be carrying that around. And when you are going throughout your day, the mind is uplifted, it's bright, it's radiant, and so is the body. You won't feel this heaviness about the body. And this is how you calm the bodily activity, is through training the mind. Now, number 9, the monk is well liberated in mind. A monk's mind is liberated from craving, anger, and ignorance, or unknowing of true reality. So this is where you need to understand what each one of these poisons are, or these unwholesome roots, and what the antidotes are. I teach this as part of the group learning program, where you learn what craving, anger, and ignorance is, and you learn about the antidotes. So the antidote to craving is breathing mindfulness meditation and practicing generosity. The antidote to anger is loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in your attention, speech, and actions. The antidote to ignorance is to cultivate wisdom. And that's why you're not believing any of the teachings, but you're learning, you're reflecting to independently verify them, and you're practicing them. And this is what leads to the transformation of the mind, where you've now uprooted these 3 poisons, or these 3 unwholesome roots. But you need to know what they are, so that when they're arising in the mind, when craving is arising, you can spot it, and then you can stamp it out. When anger, as well as those lesser versions like frustration, irritation, annoyance, agitation, those are all coming from the same poison. They're just lesser versions. You need to be able to identify those with your mindfulness, and you stamp that out, applying the antidote. And then the ignorance, this is the whole reason why everything's even happening in the unenlightened mind, and why it still stays stuck in the unenlightened mind. So even though we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, it's really because of ignorance that craving and anger continues to persist. So that's why you're focusing from the very beginning of learning with me on cultivating wisdom and not believing anything in the teachings of the Buddha, and you're being guided to be able to cultivate this wisdom. And as you gain wisdom of the path, then you gain wisdom of how to eliminate craving and anger, and this is what fully purifies the mind, eliminating those 10 fetters, which the 10 fetters are just a deeper description of craving, anger, and ignorance. But there's certain symptoms and there's certain antidotes at this level of craving, anger, and ignorance that you need to understand and implement. And then there's the same thing with the 10 fetters. There's certain symptoms that you need to understand and certain antidotes to each one of those. So the Buddha is saying here that the mind is well liberated, that meaning it's free of craving, anger, and ignorance. It no longer has even a trace amount of craving, anger, and ignorance. And this is what you would like to reside in, that the mind is well liberated from craving, anger, and ignorance. And then the way that is all accomplished is number 10, which is well liberated by wisdom, that you understand this craving and that you've cut it off at the root, made it like a palm stump, obliterated it so that it is no longer subject to future arising. Sometimes I talk about this like taking a wet rag and wringing it out, getting every last little drop of water out of that rag. The Buddha's description here is much more detailed, where he's talking about obliterating. Sometimes he talks about it like destroying craving, anger, and ignorance. And that's what you'd like to do. So you'd like to be able to be aware of what craving, anger, and ignorance is, so that when it's arising, you can see it and then obliterate it. And that's ultimately what's going to lead to your complete liberation of mind by wisdom. Because what you're trying to do is arise this wisdom of how to address these 10 fetters and get them out of the mind. And this is what's ultimately going to lead to your enlightenment, is by eliminating all of these pollutions and poisons. And now the mind is liberated from the strong feelings. Liberation means freedom. So you no longer have these strong feelings. Your mind is free of the anger, hatred, the frustration, the irritation, the guilt, the shame, the fear, the boredom, the loneliness, the shyness, the resentment, the jealousy, all those strong feelings. The mind is liberated from all of that stuff by the time you're experiencing enlightenment. So the Buddha is saying that anybody in the past, anybody in the present, or anybody in the future are all going to reside in these same abodes. Anybody who's aspiring to get to enlightenment, they would need to understand all of those 10 things and then be practicing them as well. But you do this gradually, slowly but surely. So don't feel like you have to rush out and go do this stuff all in one time, but slowly but surely you build up your wisdom. So that's why I go through all of these. So wherever you see that you need help, you reach out for help and ask for help. And I will guide you to the resources you need, or help you through personal guidance or any other way that you might need help. Let me see what questions you guys have on this. All right, Marcy, you have a question?
Thank you, Teacher David. So oneness of the mind, does that happen when you become mindful of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, like body is body, feelings is feelings, mind is mind, and mental objects are mental objects? Is that where your mind would be considered a oneness and not have a subconscious?
You'll need the 4 foundations of mindfulness in order to get to oneness of mind, but it's not only that. So it's the Eightfold Path, putting together the Eightfold Path, which is going to lead to the production of the jhanas. So it's right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So you're developing your meditation practice to develop your mental discipline, you're developing your moral conduct, you're developing your wisdom, and all of this coming together as you start getting these jhanas that are experienced throughout your day. Then you'll be able to get to a point where you can observe the entire mind. If you've ever been at some point in your life where you've been sitting there talking to somebody, and then just you blurted something out, and after you said it, you were like, why did I say that? That was so silly. That was so stupid. Why did I say that? That's the subconscious mind, that dirty devil subconscious mind that's motivating unskillful conduct, where the conscious mind in the unenlightened state, you're aware of the conscious mind, but you're not aware of the subconscious mind. The conscious mind is polluted, but the subconscious mind is even more polluted than the conscious mind. And because you're not aware in the unenlightened state of the subconscious mind, it's in there motivating unskillful conduct because of the pollution. But by the time you've trained enough through meditation and all the other teachings on the Eightfold Path, you get into that second jhana, which among other things, you get this oneness of mind, or this unification of the mind, where you now have full clarity of being able to observe the entire mind, that there is no longer a subconscious mind. You won't find yourself in a situation where you just blurt something out mistakenly and then kind of like, why did I say that? That was so silly. And that's how you'll know that you have full awareness of the mind, because there isn't anything kind of like hidden in the corners. There isn't any dust under your carpet motivating unskillful conduct.
Thank you, Teacher David.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere on our platforms. So let's go ahead and move into the next chapter, which is chapter, 43, I think. Yeah, 43. There we go. Someone like to read this?
I can read again, Teacher David, if you'd like.
Sure, go ahead.
One who abandons the taints that should be abandoned by saying, monks, A well-taught noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their teachings, who has regard for true men and is skilled and disciplined in their teachings, understands what things are fit for attention and what things are unfit for attention. Since that is so, he does not attend to those things unfit for attention, and he attends to those things fit for attention. What are the things unfit for attention that he does not attend to? They are things such as when he attends to them, the unarisen taint of sensual desire arises in him, and the arisen taint of sensual desire increases. The unarisen taint of existence, personal existence view arises in him, and the arising taint of existence, personal existence view increases. The unarisen taint of ignorance, unknowing of true reality, arises in him, and the arisen taint of ignorance, unknowing of true reality, increases. These are the things unfit for attention that he does not attend to. And what are the things fit for attention that he attends to? They are things such that when he attends to them, the unarisen taint of sensual desire does not arise in him, and the arisen taint of sensual desire is abandoned. The unarisen taint of existence, personal existence view, does not arise in him, and the arisen taint of existence, personal existence view, is abandoned. The unarisen taint of ignorance, unknowing of true reality, does not arise in him, and the arisen taint of ignorance, unknowing of true reality, is abandoned. These are the things fit for attention that he attends to. By not attending to things unfit for attention, and by attending to things fit for attention, unarisen taints do not arise in him, and arisen taints are abandoned. He attends wisely. This is discontentedness. He attends wisely. This is the cause of discontentedness. He attends wisely. This is the elimination of discontentedness. He attends wisely. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. When he attends wisely in this way, 3 fetters are abandoned in him: personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior, and observances. This is called the taints that should be abandoned by seeing.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So the Buddha is describing things here in a very detailed sense. And of course, he's talking about individual fetters, because that's what all of his teachings are guiding you to do, is eliminate those pollutions or those defilements, those fetters. So let me just summarize this for you in an easy way to understand it. Is this first part that he's talking about abandoning things that are going to arise certain fetters in the mind. So let me give you an example. Say that you at one time were into alcohol and drugs, and that now you realize as part of this path that you're interested in staying far, far away from that stuff and not interested in getting involved in those whatsoever. Well, what the Buddha is describing to you here is don't get involved in those things and stay far away from them. So if you used to go out at 10 p.m., 11 p.m. to the bars and kind of hoop it up in town, so to speak, then what you should probably do is stay home, right? And don't go to those places. Don't go around the bars. Don't go around where all that music's playing and, people are hooping it up and there's all this, things that are going on in the bars, but, go to do things that are wholesome. So he's saying, what are the things that are unfit for attention that he does not attend to? So central desire here, this example of drugs and alcohol is a good one for that, because if you have a certain central desire for drugs and alcohol and you continue to go around the bars, this is going to arise your central desire and it's going to increase it in the mind. Here's another example. Say that you're interested in eating more healthy and you go into a grocery store, and this is a regular grocery store that you normally go into, and you know that there's a certain aisle that has all the snacks and all the junk food. And if you're trying to stay away from that stuff, then you don't go down that aisle. You go other parts of the grocery store, like the fruits and vegetables and things that you're interested in eating like that. So the Buddha is describing here to not give attention or don't keep doing the things that are going to arise these fetters. If there's certain things that you know that you're doing in life that are arising central desire or personal existence view or this ignorance or unknowing of true reality, don't keep doing those things, because it's going to arise those fetters in your mind, and now you're going to make unwise decisions because of it. And then he says, and what are the things fit for attention that he attends to? That you essentially do things in life that don't arise central desire, that don't arise personal existence view, and that don't arise ignorance, that you make wise decisions about the things that you get involved in, that you do wholesome things. And this is what's going to ultimately lead to eliminating the three fetters that he talks about here: personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior, and observances. That's what you would like to get to. In order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, is you're going to need to eliminate personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. So paying attention to the things that are arising central desire, personal existence view, and ignorance or unknowing of true reality, by paying attention to the things that are not going to arise that and help you to abandon these things, is actually going to help you to get to improvement where you can eliminate the first three fetters. And one of the things that the Buddha says to attend to is, this is discontentedness, this is the cause of discontentedness, the elimination, and the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. This is the Four Noble Truths. He's pointing to that because that's the beginning of the path. When you understand the Four Noble Truths and the cause of discontentedness being craving, desire, attachment, then you understand that this central desire is all craving, desire, attachment. That's what the mind's doing. So you'll need to attend to the Four Noble Truths and deeply understand them and penetrate them. And then when you see that you're involved in certain things that are arising, this central desire, this personal existence view, or this unknowing of true reality or ignorance, then abandon those things. Don't allow the mind to continue to do those things or be around those things. You guys have any questions on this chapter? All right, I'm not seeing any questions here, so let's move on to the, Eugene has a question. Go ahead, Eugene.
Yeah. Hello, David. I have one short question. Can you scroll a bit down, please?
Sure.
Yeah, to the point, when he attends wisely in this way, three fetters are abundant in him: personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. Why is observances abundant? Wrong behavior I can understand, but why, or more or less, maybe a question first, what exactly means observances?
What wrong observances are rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, understanding that those things don't lead to enlightenment. Because if you've attended wisely, then you understand dependent origination, and that rites, rituals, ceremonies don't lead to enlightenment. Because you understand the true problem is the ignorance and unknowing of true reality. So up here, if you have attended wisely to eliminating the unarisen taint of ignorance, then you have gained wisdom, and you understand that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship aren't going to lead to your enlightenment.
Okay, thanks. I didn't connect its observances to the word wrong as well, so that's why I misunderstood it. It's okay. Thank you very much.
Sure, you're welcome. All right, so let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 44. Someone would like to read this one? Okay, go ahead, Donnie.
Of various kinds. When friends, a noted disciple understands the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, the wholesome and the root of the wholesome, in that way he is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the teachings, and has arrived at these true teachings. And what, friends, is the unwholesome? What is the root of the unwholesome? What is the wholesome, and what is the root of the wholesome? Killing living beings is unwholesome. Taking what is not given is unwholesome. Misconduct in sensual pleasures is unwholesome. False speech is unwholesome. Malicious speech is unwholesome. Harsh speech is unwholesome. Gossip is unwholesome. Craving is unwholesome. Ill will is unwholesome. wrong view or ignorance is unwholesome. This is called the unwholesome. And what is the root of the unwholesome? Craving is the root of the unwholesome. Anger is the root of the unwholesome. Ignorance or unknowing of true reality is a root of the unwholesome. This is called the root of the unwholesome. And what is the wholesome? Abstention from killing living beings is wholesome. Abstention from taking what is not giving is wholesome. Abstention from misconduct in sensual pleasures is wholesome. Abstention from false speech is wholesome. Abstention from malicious speech is wholesome. Abstention from harsh speech is wholesome. Abstention from gossip is wholesome. Non-craving or generosity is wholesome. Non-ill will or loving kindness is wholesome. Right view or wisdom is wholesome. This is called the wholesome. And what is the root of the wholesome? Non-craving or generosity is the root of the unwholesome. Non-anger, loving kindness is the root of the wholesome. Non-ignorance, wisdom is the root of the wholesome. This is called the root of the wholesome. When a noble disciple has thus understood the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, the wholesome and the root of the wholesome, he entirely abandons the underlying tendency of craving. He abolishes the underlying tendency to anger. He completely destroys the underlying tendency to the view and conceit I am. And by abandoning ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and arousing true wisdom, he here and now makes an end to discontentedness. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the teaching, and has arrived at its true teaching.
I'm going to stop you there, Donnie, because this goes on for quite a while. So let me teach this part, and then I'll explain to you what we'll do with the other part. So here the Buddha is showing you the underlying engine of a lot of his other teachings. That's what we're getting in this book. Like dependent origination is showing you the detail of why he teaches what he teaches on this path to enlightenment. He's showing you the cause and effect. He's like showing his work. So if you're in class in elementary school and you just write out an answer and your teacher's like, be sure to show your work, be sure to show your work. You got to show your thought process of what led you to that answer. So the Buddha is giving you the answer of how to get to enlightenment through the Eightfold Path, through the 5 precepts, through lots of his other teachings. He's giving you the answer, but he exposes you at different times to the engine or the detail, the work, so that you can understand. So he teaches you the 5 precepts, for example, and he just explains to you the 5 precepts in the 5 precepts. But here he's going into a little bit more detail and showing you the wholesome and the unwholesome and the root of what's actually motivating these certain behaviors and these certain decisions. Because once you understand the root, then you can shave this wild bush back all the way down to the root and get the root out. So as part of your path to enlightenment, you're going to learn many of the things that are wholesome and that promote wholesomeness in the mind and that are wise for you to cultivate in the mind. You're going to learn many things that are unwholesome and that lead to unwise decisions and unwholesome results. And what your goal is to apply effort to cultivate and encourage and support the wholesome and eliminate the unwholesome. So here the Buddha is just giving you a little bit of that in this particular discourse. And then in other discourses, he gives you other details about the wholesome and the unwholesome. So here, mostly what he's talking about is going back to the 5 precepts. Not everything, but a lot of it is. Where he's talking about killing living beings, where he's talking about stealing, where he's talking about sexual misconduct, or here more generally misconduct in all sensual pleasures, false speech, which is lying. But then he goes into malicious speech, harsh speech, gossip, and then talking about craving, anger, and ignorance, or craving ill will and ignorance, that these are unwholesome. They're going to motivate unwholesomeness, not only the things that he's talking about here, that craving, anger, and ignorance motivate. There's these here, but it motivates a lot of other unwholesome, unwise decisions as well. And then because you're harming through making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, that harm comes back to you. And then he traces it back to the actual root, which is the craving, anger, and ignorance. And I've explored this with you. If you took the group learning program or you read chapter 8 of volume 1, that's where I fully describe all three of the poisons, what they are, what symptoms they're going to experience when you have these poisons arising, and the antidotes to those poisons or these three unwholesome roots. So here the Buddha is explaining that in his words, and you see that in volume 1, chapter 8 of the words that I share. And then he talks about the wholesome, which is essentially just the opposite. And now when you see this, you're like, all right, I would like to eliminate the unwholesome, and I would like to encourage, support, and motivate the wholesome. And you're given tools and techniques to be able to do that. These aren't rules, they're not commandments. He's explaining to you the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, because when you're practicing wholesome moral conduct and you're putting wholesomeness out into the world, then that's what's going to come back to you more and more through your decisions. And he's explaining to you that what's at the root of you being able to practice this wholesome moral conduct is to practice generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. These are referred to as the three wholesome roots, where the three unwholesome roots are craving, anger, and ignorance. And what you're working to do is eliminate those and bring in the wholesome of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And by doing that, that is what actually leads to the end of discontentedness. The end of discontentedness is enlightenment. By getting to the elimination of the craving, anger, and ignorance through arising the wholesome roots of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, that's what's going to lead to the end of discontentedness, because you've uprooted the mind of these pollutions. So end of discontentedness is enlightenment itself, because you fully purified the mind. You're in that fourth stage of enlightenment as an arahant, that there is no more discontent feelings. So let me see what questions you guys have on this before we move on. And as you guys are thinking about questions, let me just explain what this nutriment is. We're not going to read all of this because it actually goes on throughout this chapter and explains each individual aspect of dependent origination and some other things. So if you guys are learning in this class, then you should be reading these chapters, or you might think about reading these chapters either before or after class. If you read them before class, it will help you to be able to come to class prepared with certain questions, because in some situations, we're not going to be able to discuss the entire chapter. So here, let me just explain nutriment, because I don't think we've seen it yet in terms of the books that we've studied so far. What the Buddha talks about of nutriment is this is what's feeding the mind's craving, anger, and ignorance. This is what's feeding continued existence. And what you would like to do is you'd like to cut that off and no longer feed craving, anger, and ignorance, or give the mind this nutriment of continuous existence. And the way that you do that is through the Eightfold Path, is learning and practicing the Eightfold Path. So where you see craving arising in the mind, by restraining the mind, you're no longer giving it the nutriment to continue. You're no longer nourishing it and providing it what it needs to continue to long and yearn. You're pulling the mind back. Same thing with anger. When you see anger arising in the mind, you'd like to restrain the mind. Or if you see ignorance or unknowing of true reality, the same thing. You'd like to no longer provide it this nutriment, because that's what's going to continue it forward, and then you're going to continue to experience craving, anger, and ignorance and continuous problems. So you need to get to the point where you've cut off at the base, you've obliterated any nutriment that you're providing these three unwholesome roots. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you to accomplish that. So let me see if you guys have any questions on any of this stuff. And Donnie, I'm not going to have you read all the rest of it because it's quite extensive. And it's a lot of repetition in some cases. But if you guys haven't read this yet, you should definitely go through and read each one of these, because he's describing each of the factors of dependent origination in detail for you. All right, I'm not seeing any questions here, so we'll just move on to the next one. So thank you for reading that one, Donnie. You can see here that it's quite extensive what the Buddha is explaining. This is probably one of the longest chapters in the whole book series for this particular type. And then you've got my descriptions in here as well, and some links to be able to point you to how to get more detail on that. So now we go to chapter 45. Does someone would like to read this? All right, go ahead, Donnie.
Factors for stream enter. First discourse. Then the venerable Sariputta approached the perfectly enlightened one paid homage or respect to him and sat down to one side. The perfectly enlightened one then said to him, Sariputta, this is said, a factor for stream entry, a factor for stream entry. What now, Sariputta, is a factor for stream entry? Association with wholesome persons, venerable sir, is a factor for stream enter. Hearing the true teachings is a factor for stream entry. Careful attention is a factor for stream entry. Practice in accordance with the teachings is a factor for stream entry. Good, Sariputta. Association with wholesome persons, Sariputta, is a factor for stream entry. Hearing the true teachings is a factor for stream entry. Careful attention is a factor for stream entry. Practice in accordance with the teachings is a factor for stream entry.
Okay, thank you, Donnie. So here the Buddha is giving 4 things that need to be practiced in order to get to stream entry, among all the other things that we've been discussing as part of this book. He's talking with Sariputta, who's one of his primary students. There's 2 students that the Buddha identifies during his lifetime as his chief students and primary students. Sariputta is one of those, so you'll see where he's talking to Sariputta at different times. So this first aspect or factor of stream entry, among all the others that we've discussed, is association with wholesome persons. An individual who is in the first stage of enlightenment would understand the natural law of karma to a certain degree, that they understand any decision that they make is going to have certain consequences or certain results. And one of the decisions that we make is, who do we associate with? You're never interested in judging other people. That would be unwise, to look down on people or to look up to people. And this is going to put the mind into having conceit. And now you're going to find it very challenging in certain relationships. But you would like to make decisions about who to associate with out of wise decision making, not out of judgment of looking down or up to people. So if you associate with wholesome persons, then you will find that you'll have wholesome experiences. Whereas if you associate with people who are into unwholesome things, then you're going to have certain ramifications as part of that. So one of the examples that I typically give is that, say you have a friend from childhood that you've been clinging on to this relationship, and maybe they're a drug dealer, but you've known them for so long. You knew them when you were 5 years old, 10 years old. They weren't selling drugs back then, but now they've gotten into selling drugs, and you're just clinging to this relationship. Now you guys are driving down the street and the police pull you over. If they slip some drugs under your chair, the police search your vehicle, you're the one that's going to jail for that. So this would be a result of a decision that you've made to associate with unwholesome individuals. So what you would like to do is look at the individuals that you choose to associate with and make wise choices. And one of the ways that you can do that without judgment, but just through wise decision making, is look at the 5 precepts. The 5 precepts are things that we understand as part of the path to enlightenment, and we describe them as the 5 precepts. But these things are oftentimes taught in many parts of the world and many different traditions. Even our parents and grandparents will teach things like the 5 precepts, not to the same level of detail as the Buddha, but they'll teach those general things. So if you see certain friends that are practicing what we would consider the 5 precepts, you can ensure that they're making wise decisions as it relates to their life. So therefore, if you choose to be friends with them, then you can be assured that certain decisions that they're making aren't going to come back to hurt them and thus you. So you can look at things like that. So that's what the Buddha is describing here, is to associate with wholesome individuals. Then there's hearing the true teachings. That's what you guys are doing by attending the classes, by reading the books, by digesting the content that I share. These are the true teachings of the Buddha in the words of the Buddha. I know with 100% certainty that these teachings are going to lead you not only to stream entry, which is the first stage of enlightenment, but they will lead you all the way to enlightenment, to the attainment of enlightenment as an arahant in that 4th stage of enlightenment, where you can completely eliminate 100% of all discontentedness. If you weren't learning the true teachings, if you were learning from people who are just sharing whatever they think the teachings of the Buddha are, and there's tons of books out there, tons of courses and classes that people refer to as Buddhism, but they're not based in the original words of the Buddha. What you would like to get to is where you're studying resources and studying with the teacher that are the actual true teachings, the original words of the Buddha. And that's what you guys are doing if you're studying any of the teachings that I share. Then the third one here is careful attention. This is paying close attention to the decisions that you make. That when we're in the unenlightened state and before we're on this path, I describe it as we're running through the forest, knocking down the trees, burning up the forest. And as we're doing that, we're starting to smell smoke, and we're like, why is it so smoky around here? You know, who lit the fire? And we don't realize that it was us. We're the ones who were knocking down the trees and burning up the forest. But as you learn these teachings and you understand this cause and effect, you start paying very close attention to all the decisions that you're making, taking your time very wisely, processing the experiences that you're having around you, and making wise decisions about each thing that you're doing. That initially is somewhat of a challenge. If you're used to walking through the forest and knocking down the trees and burning up the forest, it can be quite challenging to now pay close attention to all the decisions that you're making. But that's part of what it means to move to this higher consciousness, that you're functioning through this higher awareness of mind, and you're paying close attention to the decisions that you're making, because you know there's going to be some result as a part of that. There's a cause and effect here, and you would like to make sure that your effect is as wholesome as possible. And you understand that in order to do that, you need to pay careful attention to your decisions. So that's what a stream enterer would have needed to do in order to get to stream entry, is pay close attention to their decisions. And then they would continue to do that all the way up to enlightenment and beyond. You're going to pay close attention. Eventually, you get to the point where you're practicing these teachings effortlessly, that you don't have to put things under a microscope so much. But as you're going through that and you're transforming the mind and you're upgrading the mind to this new way of life, you're going to need to pay close attention to all the different decisions that you're making. And you'll just get in the habit of doing that, and it'll become easier and easier for you, and you'll actually find quite joyful in doing that, because you know that when you pay close attention to your decisions, it's going to produce wholesome results. So in certain situations, you're going to need to pull back. You're going to need to restrain the mind, because the way the mind works with craving, anger, and ignorance is it wants to hurry up and get to those pleasant feelings, those conditioned pleasant feelings that it's chasing after. It wants to hurry up and get to those. And that's why it's running through the forest, knocking down the trees and burning up the forest, because it's after its own selfish desires. It doesn't want to take its time. It wants to hurry up and get to those pleasant feelings. So when you see that and you're restraining the mind, this is helping you to pay careful attention to your decision making. And then the thing that's really transforming the mind and doing all of this, yes, the intellectual learning is helping. Yes, the reflection to independently verify the teachings is helping, but it's the practice of the teachings, accordance to the teachings. That's what's really transforming the mind. There can be people in the world who intellectually understand the teachings of the Buddha, but they maybe haven't reflected on them very deeply, and they're not practicing them. And this is why they're not experiencing the 4 stages of enlightenment or enlightenment itself. So it's practice in accordance with the teachings. That's where the real transformation is happening. And all the way up until you're enlightened and you're experiencing enlightenment for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you're not yet 100% practicing the teachings in accordance with the teachings. But to get into stream entry, you would at least be practicing the Eightfold Path in its entirety. And you haven't completely eliminated all the 10 fetters, but you understand the Eightfold Path and you're practicing that in accordance to that level of detail. And then there's deeper level of detail of teachings that plug into the Eightfold Path that then you're going to be focusing more and more closely on in order to move from this first stage of enlightenment as a stream enterer and beyond. So let me see what questions you guys have on this chapter. All right, there's no questions here. So let's go to the next chapter, which is 46. And this is a chapter that we've read in other parts of this book. It's very similar. So if you guys would like to read this, you can, and then I just open up to any questions you guys have. I won't necessarily explain it in a whole lot of detail. Is there someone who would like to read this?
I can read, Teacher David, if you'd like.
Sure, go ahead, Marcy.
The noble disciple, householder, who possesses 4 things is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as his destination. What for? Here, householders. 1. A noble disciple possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha thus. The perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate, knower of the world, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one, the fortunate one. 2. He possesses confirmed confidence in the teachings thus. The teachings are well expounded by the perfectly enlightened one, directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable to be personally experienced by the wise. 3. He possesses confirmed confidence in the community thus. The community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is practicing the wholesome way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way, that is, the 4 pairs of person, the 8 types of individuals. This community of perfectly enlightened one's disciples is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respectful salutations, and surpassed fields of merit for the world. 4. He resides at home with a mind free of stain or of selfishness, freely generous, open-handed, joyful in letting go, one devoted to charity, joyful in giving and sharing. A noble disciple who possesses these 4 things is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as his destination.
All right. Thank you, Marcy. So the first 3 here we've talked about in our previous classes, which are the triple gem or the triple jewel. This is confidence in the Buddha, confidence in his teachings, and confidence in his community. And I've talked about how one would accomplish this. So if you haven't learned this yet from me, you can go back to those other classes, or you can read the book and see what it means to develop that confidence, because you might not have that confidence when you first get started. Most people don't. That you develop that over time through investigating his teachings. But then there's this 4th one, which so far the Buddha has put in here about practicing virtuous behavior. But here he's changing it a bit. He's adding this one, which is the practice of generosity. That in order to get to stream entry, that first stage of enlightenment, you're going to need to be practicing generosity in all parts of your life. So we've talked about generosity in the group learning program. We've talked about it at other times. There's an entire book in the Pali Canon and English Study Group, which is volume 13, that's all about generosity. This is so utterly important to your practice that you're willing to give and share, that you're not being selfish or stingy, because that's oftentimes what the mind does when it has craving, is it holds on and holds on and holds on. So you need to be willing and able to freely share and find joy in that. And that's what's going to actually train the mind to let go. That it's the breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity as well. So a stream enterer, one in that first stage of enlightenment, is going to know how to practice generosity from the middle way. If you're practicing extensively and you have craving to practice generosity, you're not going to have the needs met for your basic necessities. But if you were stingy and selfish, then that's not going to help you either. So you need to find this middle way where you can be joyful in practicing generosity in various parts of your life. So let me know if you guys have questions on this particular chapter. All right, there's no questions here, so we'll move on to the next one. You guys can see all the details here that I provide in the individual chapters to read. This is chapter 47. Someone would like to read this one? Go ahead, Donnie.
Thus for stream entry, 3rd discourse. I will teach you, Brahmin householders, a teaching exposition applicable to oneself. Listen to that and attend closely, I will speak. What householders is the teaching's exposition applicable to oneself? Here, householders, a noble disciple reflects thus. I am one who aspires to live, who does not aspire to die. I have the objective of peacefulness and enthusiasm to discontentedness. Since I am one who aspires to live and am enthusiastic to discontentedness, if someone were to take my life, that would not be pleasing and agreeable to me. Now, if I were to take the life of another, of one who aspires to live, who does not aspire to die, who has the object of peacefulness and is unenthusiastic to discontentedness, that would not be pleasing and agreeable to the other either. What is displeasing and disagreeable to me is displeasing and disagreeable to the other too. How can I inflict upon another what is displeasing and disagreeable to me? Having reflected thus, he himself abstains from the destruction of life encourages others to abstain from the destruction of life, and speaks in praise of abstinence from the destruction of life. Thus, this bodily conduct of his is purified in three respects. Again, householders, a noble disciple reflects thus. If someone were to take from me what I have not given, that is to commit theft, that will not be pleasing and agreeable to me. Now, if I were to take from another what he has not given, that is to commit theft, that will not be pleasing and agreeable to the other either. What is displeasing and disagreeable to me is displeasing and disagreeable to the other too. How can I inflict upon another what is displeasing and disagreeable to me? Having reflected thus, he himself abstains from taking what is not given, encourages others to abstain from taking what is not given, and speaks in praise of abstinence from taking what is not given. Thus, this bodily conduct of his is purified in three respects. Again, householders, if a noble disciple reflects thus, if someone were to commit adultery with my wives, that will not be pleasing and agreeable to me. Now, if I were to commit adultery with the wives of another, that will be not pleasing and disagreeable to the other either. What is displeasing and disagreeable to me is displeasing and disagreeable to the other too. How can I inflict upon another what is displeasing and disagreeable to me? Having reflected thus, he himself abstains from sexual misconduct, encourages others to abstain from sexual misconduct, and speaks in praise of abstinence from sexual misconduct. Thus, this bodily conduct of his is purified in three aspects. Again, householders, a noble disciple reflects thus. If someone were to damage my welfare with false speech, that will not be pleasing and agreeable to me. Now, if I were to damage the welfare of another with false speech, that will not be pleasing and agreeable to the other either. What is displeasing and disagreeable to me is displeasing and disagreeable to the other too. How can I inflict upon another what is displeasing and disagreeable to me? Having reflected thus, he himself abstains from false speech, encourages others to abstain from false speech, and speaks in praise of abstinence from false speech. Thus, this verbal conduct of his is purified in three respects. Again, householders, a noble disciple reflects thus. If someone were to divide me from my friends by divisive speech, that will not be pleasing and agreeable to me. Now, if I were to divide another from his friends by divisive speech, that will not be pleasing and agreeable to the other either. What is displeasing and disagreeable to me is displeasing and disagreeable to the other too. How can I inflict upon another what is displeasing and disagreeable to me? Having reflected thus, he himself abstains from divisive speech, encourages others to abstain from divisive speech, and speaks in praise of abstinence from divisive speech. Thus, this verbal conduct of his is purified in three respects. Again, householders, a noble disciple reflects thus. If someone were to address me with harsh speech, that will not be pleasing and agreeable to me. Now, if I were to address another with harsh speech, that will not be pleasing and agreeable to the other either. What is displeasing and disagreeable to me is displeasing and disagreeable to the other too. How can I inflict upon other what is displeasing and disagreeable to me? Having reflected thus, he himself abstains from harsh speech, encourages others to abstain from harsh speech, and speaks in praise of abstinence from harsh speech. Thus, this verbal conduct of his is purified in three respects. Again, householders, a noble disciple reflects thus. If someone were to address me with frivolous speech and idle chatter, that will not be pleasing and agreeable to me. Now, if I were to address another with frivolous speech and idle chatter, that will not be pleasing and agreeable to the other either. What is displeasing and disagreeable to me is displeasing and disagreeable to the other too. How can I inflict upon another which is displeasing and disagreeable to me? Having reflected thus, he himself abstains from idle chatter and encourages others to abstain from idle chatter and speaks in praise from abstinence from idle chatter. Thus, this verbal conduct of his is purified in three respects. He possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha. He possesses confirmed confidence in the teaching. He possesses confidence in the community. He possesses the virtues dear to the Noble One: unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unblotched, liberating, praised by the wise, not misunderstood, and leading to concentration. When householders, the noble disciple possesses these 7 wholesome qualities and these 4 admirable states, if he aspires, he could by himself declare of himself, I am one finished with hell, finished with the animal realm, finished with the realm of afflicted spirits, finished with the plane of misery, the bad destinations, the netherworld. I am a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as my destination.
All right. Thank you, Donnie. So the underlying message that is here in this entire chapter is don't do to others the things that you find displeasing as well. Or the other way you could say that is do to others what you find to be pleasing, right? Like there's other teachers in various traditions that teach something similar, but here the Buddha is going into a lot of detail and he's explaining each individual aspect. And that's what a Buddha does, is they're very clear, they're very concise, they're very precise in their teachings because they know that they only have a limited time to share their teachings to help people get to enlightenment. And then their teachings need to help others after they die. So they need to be sure that they're very clear, concise, and precise with their teachings. So here he's explaining certain things that you wouldn't find agreeable. So therefore, why would you do it to somebody else? This can help motivate you to make wise decisions about your conduct. And as you reflect on these things, you might observe that there are certain things that you find displeasing, but yet you do it, right? And you would like to stop that because as long as you keep doing those things will keep coming back to you. So maybe you don't like it when people gossip and slander you, but yet maybe you gossip and slander other people. And as long as you keep gossiping and slandering, you're going to keep experiencing people gossiping and slandering you. So in order for you to stop all of that and stop people from gossiping and slandering about you, you're going to need to stop gossiping and slandering yourself. So here the Buddha is going through all these different things that you should consider to eliminate from your practice. And he's saying that one who is a stream enterer would have eliminated all these things. So the first one, he's talking about taking life, I'm pretty sure. Let's see. He aspires to live and not die. Yes, he's talking about taking life and being unenthusiastic to discontentedness, being uninterested in experiencing discontentedness. Then the second one, he's talking about the second precept, which is taking what is not given. The third one, he's talking about the third precept, which is sexual misconduct, which gives you more details in the actual precepts. Then the fourth one, he's talking about false speech, which again is part of the 5 precepts. But then he goes into various types of speech, divisive speech or argumentative speech. He talks then about harsh speech. He talks then about frivolous speech or idle chatter, and that you will have eliminated all of this in order to get to enlightenment. And this is part of those wrong behaviors that he talks about as part of that third fetter. And he describes how to practice this in the Eightfold Path, that if you've purified your right speech, your right action, then that takes care of all of these things here, that you're no longer doing any of those things. And by purifying your moral conduct with right speech and right action, as it's described in the Eightfold Path, along with eliminating rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, you will have eliminated wrong behavior and wrong observances, that one particular fetter. And you would like to be practicing this moral conduct for an extended period of time. It's not that you just do it for one day or 1 week, but you're doing it for an extended period of time, and that's what's going to clean up the decisions that you're making. So therefore, by you making less and less harmful decisions and unwise decisions, you'll experience less and less unwholesomeness coming back to you because you've cleaned up your moral conduct to a certain degree. And then from the first stage of enlightenment, you'll go deeper in cleaning up other aspects of your moral conduct as well. So let me know what questions you guys have about this chapter, if any at all. All right, I'm not seeing any there. So let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 48. Let me see what this one's all about. I read these before class, but today we have quite a few of them. This is quite long. Okay, let me summarize this one for you guys rather than actually reading it. So here, the Buddha is giving you 4 factors of stream entry in 10 modes. This is where he's going to actually talk a little bit about the tenfold path. That so far what you've learned is the eightfold path. That's what actually eliminates the discontentedness and helps you get to enlightenment. The tenfold path, there's 2 additional steps, step 9 and 10. You don't learn actual teachings to practice in order to practice, to be able to then cultivate the 9th and 10th factor. But the 9th and 10th factor are a culmination of practicing all the other factors. The 9th one is right wisdom, and the 10th one is right liberation. An enlightened being is practicing the tenfold path, but up until you get to enlightenment, you're practicing the eightfold path. So let's see what I can talk about here. I just would like to scan it a little bit. Let me see. These are actually, the first 4 things are things that we've talked about, and the Buddha discusses these as part of the factors of getting to stream entry. This is having confidence towards the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and then practicing virtuous moral conduct. Those are those first 4 things. Then he's talking about the tenfold path, that you eliminate wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, wrong concentration, and wrong wisdom and wrong liberation. Those are the 2 additional steps on the tenfold path. And then here he's talking about, let's see. Yeah, this is just kind of a little bit more in versed format. So I'm not seeing anything additional that we could really penetrate into beyond what we've already been discussing in some of these other chapters. So if you guys have read this beforehand and you have any questions, let me know what those are. I'll just scan our social media and different platforms and see if you guys have any questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions on this one. So let's go to the chapter 49. And let me see what this one, these are all kind of longer. This is actually consolidating ones that we've also already talked about. So here, this is association with wholesome persons, hearing the true teachings, careful attention, and practice in accordance with the teachings, which we've already discussed and already talked about. And the Buddha is talking about how this leads to stream entry, once returner, non-returner, arahantship, which is the 4 stages of enlightenment. And it leads to the cultivation of wisdom, because wisdom is what you need to do in order to eliminate ignorance. And then he's saying, okay, these are the things that when cultivated and developed lead to penetrative wisdom. And it's these 4 things, which we've already talked about. So here, this is the same discourse, just in longer format. So now let's see what he's got here. One who is a trainee. Okay, let's read this one. There's some things in here that we haven't studied recently. Was there someone who would like to read this? Go ahead, Marcy.
Thank you, Teacher David. One who is a trainee. And what, monks, is the method by means of which a monk who is a trainee, standing on the plane of a trainee, understands, I am a trainee. Am I a trainee? Here, monks, a monk who is a trainee understands as it really is. This is discontentedness. He understands as it really is. This is the cause of discontentedness. He understands as it really is. This is the elimination of discontentedness. He understands as it really is. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. This is a method by means of which a monk who is a trainee stands on the plane of trainee, understands, I am a trainee. Again, monks, a monk who is a trainee considers thus, is there outside here another Aztec or Brahma who teaches teachings so real, true, actual as the perfectly enlightened one does? He understands thus, there is no other ascetic or Brahma outside here who teaches teachings so real, true, actual as the perfectly enlightened one does. This too is a method by means of which a monk who is a trainee stands on the plane of trainee, understands, I am a trainee. Again, monks, a monk who is a trainee understands the 5 spiritual faculties. the faculty of confidence, the faculty of energy, the faculty of mindfulness, the faculty of concentration, the faculty of wisdom. He does not yet have direct experience of their destination, their accumulation, their fruit, their final goal, but have pierced it through with wisdom he sees. This too is a method by means of which a monk who is a trainee stands on the plane of a trainee, understands I am a trainee.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So the Buddha is talking here about someone who's just starting on the path to enlightenment, what to focus on. And he does this in other teachings as well. Well, here he's saying, the first thing is to understand the Four Noble Truths. This is why I start students out with the Four Noble Truths typically when they first start learning with me, because you need to establish right view to even really get started on the path to enlightenment. So as you first get started, that's what you would need to deeply understand and penetrate, which I teach in other programs. Then he's saying another thing that you need to learn and understand is that as you're learning teachings, that what you see around you, after you've learned the Four Noble Truths and you see that it explains to you the problem, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward, you know that there's no other teachings that have ever explained to you why you get angry, why you get frustrated, why you have guilt or shame or fear or stress or anxiety or all these other discontent feelings. You know that it's these teachings that have explained that to you, and now you more firmly get on the path that there's no other teachings that are so real, true, or actual as the perfectly enlightened ones. Then you start to cultivate these spiritual faculties, which are essentially qualities of mind. That you start developing your confidence. That's confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. The faculty of energy. What this is the motivation and the initiative to actually do something. Oftentimes the mind can be dull and lethargic and complacent, but you would like to arise this enlightenment factor of energy where you're willing to do something, because you've got to pick up the books and you've got to do the meditations and you've got to develop your mind, and you're going to need initiative and motivation. You can't be complacent in that. So you're going to need the faculty of energy. Then the faculty of mindfulness, which is awareness of the mind. This is mindfulness showing up in many places of the teachings of the Buddha because it's so utterly important to have awareness of mind. And we typically don't have that when we're off the path to enlightenment. So we need awareness of the mind so we can see those unwholesome qualities and get rid of them. And we can see the wholesome qualities and support those, encourage those, don't allow them to fade. So you'll need to develop your mindfulness and understand how important that is. And then the faculty of concentration. This is the ability to have singleness of mind and focus on a single object. You're developing that in breathing mindfulness meditation. Along with mindfulness, you're developing that in breathing mindfulness meditation too. And then you're practicing both of these in daily life, where you're aware of the mind at all times and you have focus and concentration and practicing singleness of mind, rather than allowing the mind to rapidly cycle from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. That would be the opposite of concentration. So you'd like to do one thing, single threaded, and this is what's going to help promote the most concentration. And you're using breathing mindfulness meditation to cultivate that in daily life, but then you're practicing it in your daily life as this faculty of concentration. And then understanding the faculty of wisdom, that you need to develop the mind's wisdom through learning, reflecting, and practicing. And as the Buddha is explaining here, is that you have not yet fully understood and you're not directly practicing all of these things. You don't understand the culmination and the fruit and the final goal of all of these things yet, but you've at least understood that they're important and that you start to develop these. So as a trainee, you're developing the the Four Noble Truths. You're developing your understanding that these teachings are definitely explaining to you things that you haven't heard before. And then you're developing these 5 spiritual faculties, the faculty of confidence, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And then what the Buddha typically will focus you on at this point is improving your moral conduct. So you start looking at the 5 precepts and understanding to improve your moral conduct. And you can learn those through the 5 precepts and the moral conduct section of the Eightfold Path. And that's where a trainee kind of first gets started in the first few months. And as you're doing that, you're also developing your meditation practice as well. So any questions on this chapter? All right, so let's move on to the next one, which is chapter 51. Let me see what this one has here. Thank you, Donnie, for volunteering. if we don't read this one, I'll have you read the next one. So this is going through essentially what we just talked about with the faculties. He's just explaining it in a different way. So we don't have to go through this because we've already discussed those faculties. And let's see what this one is. The 7 factors of the fruit of stream entry. Yeah, let's read this one. Go ahead and read chapter 52, Donnie.
The 7 factors of the fruit of stream entry. Monks, there are these 6 principles of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduce to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. What are the 6? Number 1. Here, a monk maintains bodily acts of loving kindness both in public and in private towards his companions in the holy life. This is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. 2. Again, a monk maintains verbal acts of loving kindness both in public and in private towards his companions in the holy life. This too is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and unity. 3. Again, a monk maintains mental acts of loving kindness both in public and in private towards his companions in the holy life. This too is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. 4. Again, a monk uses things in common with his virtuous companions in the holy life without making reservations. He shares with them any gain of the kind that accords with the teachings and has been obtained in a way that accords with the teaching, including even the mere contents of his bowl. This too is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony and unity. 5. Again, a monk resides both in public and in private, possessing in common with his companions in the holy life these virtues, moral conduct that are unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unblotched, liberating, praised by the wise, not misunderstood, and leading to concentration. This too is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. 6. A monk resides both in public and in private, possessing in common with his companions in the holy life that right view that is noble and liberating and leads one who practices in accordance with it to the complete destruction of discontentedness. This too is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. Sorry, Teacher David, my computer just gave me a prompt that is low battery in case I got cut off.
Sure, we'll pick it up wherever you leave off.
And these are the 6 principles of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduce to cohesion, to non-dispute, to harmony, and to unity. Of these 6 principles of cordiality, the chief, the most cohesive, the most unifying is this view, or right view, that is noble and liberating, which leads to the one who practices in accordance with it to the complete destruction of discontentedness. Just as the chief, the most cohesive, the most unifying part of a pinnacle house is the pinnacle itself, so too, of these 6 principles of cordiality, the chief, the most cohesive, the most unifying is this view or right view that is noble and liberating and which leads the one who practices in accordance with it to the complete destruction of discontentedness. And how does this view or right view that is noble and liberating lead the one who practices in accordance with it to the complete destruction of discontentedness? Here, a monk gone to the forest or to the root of a tree or an empty hut considers thus: is there any obsession abandoned in myself that might so obsess my mind that I cannot know or see things as they actually are? If a monk is obsessed by sensual desire, then his mind is obsessed. If he is obsessed by ill will, then his mind is obsessed. If he is obsessed by complacency, then his mind is obsessed. If he is obsessed by restlessness and worry, then his mind is obsessed. If he is obsessed by doubt, then his mind is obsessed. If a monk is absorbed in speculation about this world, then his mind is obsessed. If a mind is absorbed in speculation about the other world, then his mind is obsessed. If a mind takes to arguing and brawling and is deep in disputes, stabbing others with verbal daggers, then his mind is obsessed. He understands thus, there is no obsession abandoned in myself, that my soul obsesses my mind, that I cannot know and see things as they actually are. My mind is well disposed for awakening to the truths. This is the first wisdom attained by him, that is noble, world transcending, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, when I pursue, develop, and cultivate this view, right view, do I personally obtain serenity? Do I personally obtain quenching? He understands thus, when I pursue, develop, and cultivate this view, right view, I personally obtain serenity, quenching. This is...
Oh, we just lost Donnie. This is the second wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcending, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, is there any other ascetic or Brahmin outside the Buddha's teachings possessed of a view, right view, such as I possess? He understands thus, there is no ascetic or Brahmin outside the Buddha's teachings possessed of a view, right view, such as I possess. This is the third wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcending, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the character of a person who possesses right view? What is the character of a person who possesses right view? This is the character of a person who possesses right view. Although he may commit some kind of misdeed for which a means of rehabilitation has been laid down, still he at once confesses, reveals, and discloses it to the teacher or to wise companions in the holy life. And having done that, he enters upon restraint for the future. Just as a young, tender infant lying prone at once draws back when he puts his hand or his foot on a live coal, so too that is the character of a person who possesses right view. He understands thus, I possess the character of a person who possesses right view. This is the fourth wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcending, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the character of a person who possesses right view? What is the character of a person who possesses right view? This is the character of a person who possesses right view. Although he may be active in various matters for his companions in the holy life, yet he has a determined regard for training in the higher virtuous behavior, moral conduct, the training in the higher mind, mental discipline, and the training in the higher wisdom. Just as a cow with a new calf, while she grazes, watches her calf, so too, that is the character of a person who possesses right view. He understands thus, I possess the character of a person who possesses right view. This is the fifth wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcending, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view? What is the strength of a person who possesses right view? This is the strength of a person who possesses right view. When the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata is being taught, he heeds it, gives it attention, engages it with all his mind, hears the teachings as with enthusiastic ears. He understands thus, I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view. This is the sixth wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcending, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view? What is the strength of a person who possesses right view? This is the strength of a person who possesses right view. When the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata is being taught, he gains inspiration in the meaning, gains inspiration in the teachings, gains joyfulness connected with the teachings. He understands thus, I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view. This is the seventh wisdom attained by him that is noble, world transcending, not shared by ordinary people. When a noble disciple is thus possessed of seven factors, he has well sought the character for realization of the fruit of stream entry. When a noble disciple is thus possessed of seven factors, he possesses the fruit of stream entry. Okay, thank you, Donnie. You're not here anymore, but thank you for the reading that you did. So here, the Buddha is describing these 6 factors of the fruit of stream entry. And he's talking about, at the beginning, this loving kindness for beings both in public and private. And that's important that you cultivate that. And that's why you have the loving kindness meditation and the practice through your intention, speech, and actions to be able to help you with that. But ultimately, what he starts getting into down here are various qualities that you would like to cultivate in order to move the mind closer to this first stage of enlightenment. I think they're very self-explanatory, but I'll open up to any questions that you guys have related to them. I will focus in on one of them because it's one that you don't see showing up too much in the Buddhist teachings, but it is an important thing to cultivate. I'm not exactly sure 100% where it is here, but I'll explain it because he talked about it here. Is he talks about confessing essentially any wrongdoings to either your teacher or to a member of the community. And what this is talking about is essentially where you're having certain slip-ups or certain mistakes that you're making on the path to enlightenment, is that you reach out to somebody for help. It's not like if you've been involved in other traditions where you go to a confessional and you're made to feel guilty and bad that you did this thing and then you're giving some kind of punishment. That's not what the teachings of the Buddha are all about. But instead, if you've had some type of slip up with your moral conduct or some other aspect of your practice, and you reach out to your teacher through personal guidance or through a personal message or private message, then that individual can then help you to be able to know how to improve that. Because if you're making mistakes or you're slipping up with your practice and you don't talk to anybody about it, then you're not going to be able to get the help you need to overcome that. You're not going to be able to cultivate the wisdom that you need. Sometimes when students are building a relationship with me or learning with me, sometimes I notice that they tell me all the good things, all the wonderful things that are happening, which is fine. You know, you're welcome to share anything and anything that you like. But what I really like to get to is, what are the things that are difficult for you? What are the things you're struggling with? What are the challenges that you're facing? Tell me about all those things. Tell me about the argument you had with your friend. Tell me about the anger and the annoyance that happened with your life partner. Or tell me about that difficult situation at work that you're struggling with. When you start talking about those things with your teacher or to somebody who's well along in the path and that senior member of the community, that's where you can actually get the real help. So the Buddha talks about this and mentions this at different places in his teachings, but it's only a few times here and there in this book series where he talks about, he uses the words and the language of confessing, but you shouldn't allow that to arise any conditioning in your mind. If you've gone to confessionals and other traditions where you felt guilty and shameful and you're given some kind of punishment as a result, that's not the way it's approached in these teachings. It's more about reaching out to get help and sharing with somebody your missteps. And then that's how you actually cultivate the wisdom. And there's other things too here that he's talking about that are very detailed. And I really like the way that he gives a little bit of an analogy at the end of each particular teaching that he has and suggestion of what he's suggesting that you actually practice, that he then gives you this little analogy to help you understand. So here he's talking about, you know, just like a cow watches over her new calf as she grazes, that you should do the same thing, as kind of watch over your mind and watch over your moral conduct and your mental discipline and your wisdom. So let me know if you guys have any questions on this particular chapter. All right, so let's see what the last chapter of this book is and see if we need to cover this or it's something that we've already discussed. It's chapter 53, Encourage, Settle, and Establish in the 4 Factors of Stream Entry. So here we've got the same 3 triple gem that we've seen in a lot of other discourses in this book. And then this last one is one that is having the moral conduct, which we've seen before. And then Okay, so here's the piece that's new in this discourse. Okay, so let's talk about this. So here the Buddha starts us off and says, monks, those for whom you have compassion and who think you should be heeded, whether friends or colleagues, relatives or kinsmen, these you should encourage, settle, and establish in the 4 factors of stream entry. So here, the 4 factors, which we've studied before, is confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and this virtuous moral conduct. What he's saying here at the beginning and at the end is he's saying, if there are people in your life that you have compassion for, and you should really have compassion for every single being, but then he adds to this, is who you think should be heeded, meaning you think that they will heed your advice. You think that they will listen to you. You think that they're interested in understanding what it is that you have to share. And whether these are friends, companions, colleagues, relatives, or kinsmen, these are people who are close to you that will heed your advice. The Buddha is saying that you should try to encourage, settle, and establish them in the teachings of the Buddha, getting this confidence in him, the teachings, the community, and this moral conduct. And sometimes the ways to do that is just to offer them a book or offer them a link to a video or a class or a program or something like that. So this is helpful for you to know that you don't push the teachings on people. You don't have a craving and desire or longing to try to convince people to practice these teachings, but there's ways that you can politely help people as you know that they're close to you and that they'll heed your advice. Let's see if you have any questions on this chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So what I'll do then is just thank all of you guys for attending and then remind you that next week we're going to be in volume 6. So you guys can move on to volume 6, which is titled The Natural Law of Karma. And you can read chapters 1 through 10 prior to class, and that's what's going to help you prepare for the actual class and get the most benefit out of it. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 23 of volume 1. This is Symbolism of the Teachings, Reminders Through Imagery, so you're welcome to join that. And then on Wednesday, we're doing loving kindness meditation. We're just kind of coming to the end of our group learning program, and we're going to restart it on the 13th of August. So picking up where the Buddha left off on this one particular teaching, if you have friends or family or companions or relatives that you have compassion for and you would like to invite them to join the group learning program, that would be an ideal time for them to join, is on the 13th of August. We're going to be restarting from the very beginning. So you could send people a link through email, you could post it on your social media, you can share it out of the Facebook group where I've let people know that we're going to be having this restart of the group learning program. So feel free to invite people to that if you like. So thank you all for your dedication and diligence. Thank you to everyone who read, and thank you for your questions. We'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee Kap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.